Steam rises from the shower floor as 20 inmates form a predatory circle around their target. Marcus the Ghost Chen stands motionless in the center, water cascading down his scarred back, seemingly oblivious to the danger closing in. Tattoos tell stories of violence across hardened bodies. Makeshift weapons glint in fluorescent light. The leader, Big Mike Torres, cracks his knuckles with deliberate menace. "Time to welcome the new fish properly," Torres growls, his voice echoing off wet concrete walls. Marcus slowly turns, revealing eyes that have seen horrors these men couldn't imagine. His lips curve into something that might be mistaken for a smile. "Gentlemen," he says quietly, "you have no idea what you've just started. Before we reveal what happens next, tell us where you're watching from and what your local time island hit. Subscribe, because tomorrow's story will leave you speechless." Now, let's go back to where this incredible story began. The diesel engine of the prison transport bus coughed black smoke into the Arizona desert air as it approached the imposing concrete walls of Riverside Maximum Security Penitentiary. Through reinforced windows, 42-year-old Marcus Chen observed the facility's defensive architecture with the systematic assessment of a career soldier. Guard towers positioned at strategic intervals. Double perimeter fencing topped with razor wire. Clear fields of fire, eliminating potential cover for escapees. The bus lurched to a halt at the security checkpoint, where armed guards conducted thorough vehicle inspections before allowing entry into the facility's outer compound. Chen's fellow passengers fidgeted nervously, their anxiety palpable in the confined space. First-time offenders whispered prayers, while career criminals maintained stoic facades that fooled no one. Chen remained perfectly still, his breathing controlled and deliberate. 20 years of Special Forces training had taught him to conserve energy for moments when it mattered most. The handcuffs around his wrists felt loose enough to slip if necessary, though he had no intention of attempting escape. This imprisonment served purposes that extended beyond criminal punishment. Warden Patricia Hayes reviewed Chen's file for the third time that morning, her weathered face creasing with concern as she studied the heavily redacted documents. Most military service records contained standard information about deployments, decorations, and discharge status. Chen's file consisted largely of black rectangles, where classified operations had been excised by federal intelligence agencies. The only clear details painted a picture that troubled Hayes considerably. Multiple homicide convictions. 15 to life sentence with possibility of parole after 8 years. Previous military service with Army Special Forces. But assignment details classified beyond her security clearance level. A handwritten notation from the federal prosecutor's office carried an ominous warning that made Hayes' stomach tighten with apprehension. Extreme caution advised during incarceration. Subject possesses advanced combat training and psychological conditioning consistent with special operations background. Recommend isolated housing and enhanced security protocols. Hayes had supervised maximum security facilities for 17 years, managing everything from gang leaders to serial killers without losing sleep. But something about Chen's file suggested dangers that transcended normal institutional challenges. The redacted sections implied military service in operations too sensitive for civilian oversight, training that prepared soldiers for missions beyond conventional warfare. Dr. Sarah Williams knocked softly before entering the warden's office, carrying her own preliminary assessment materials. As the facility's chief psychologist, Williams had evaluated thousands of incoming inmates, developing expertise in identifying potential security risks through behavioral analysis and psychological profiling. "I've reviewed the Chen case file," Williams said, settling into the chair across from Hayes' desk. "What concerns me most isn't what's documented, but what's been deliberately omitted. Military psychological evaluations typically include extensive personality testing and behavioral assessments. His file contains nothing." Hayes nodded grimly, recognizing the implications. Federal intelligence agencies don't redact routine information. Whatever Chen did during his military service was classified at levels that supersede normal criminal justice procedures. The conversation was interrupted by radio chatter announcing the transport bus's arrival at the intake facility. Hayes and Williams exchanged meaningful glances, understanding that Chen's entry into Riverside's general population would introduce variables they couldn't predict or control through standard administrative procedures. The intake process began with mechanical efficiency, as corrections officers processed the new arrivals through systematic dehumanization designed to establish institutional control. Personal belongings confiscated and cataloged. Civilian clothing exchanged for standard prison uniforms. Bodies searched with invasive thoroughness that eliminated privacy and dignity. Chen submitted to each indignity without resistance or complaint, his demeanor suggesting complete acceptance of institutional authority. But Williams observed subtle details that revealed deeper truths about his psychological state. The way he positioned himself to maintain visual contact with all exits. How he cataloged potential weapons among mundane objects. His systematic assessment of guard rotation patterns and security protocols. Officer Mike Foster supervised the strip search with professional detachment, but his military experience immediately recognized details that civilian personnel missed entirely. Chen's body told stories that extended far beyond typical criminal violence. Bullet scars formed precise patterns suggesting organized combat rather than random street encounters. Knife wounds showed defensive configurations consistent with close-quarters battle training. Burns across his shoulder blades created distinctive patterns that Foster recognized from classified briefings about enhanced interrogation techniques. "Jesus," Foster whispered under his breath as he documented the extensive scarring. "What the hell did you do over there?" Chen's response came quietly, without emotion or defensiveness. "What needed to be done, Sergeant?" "What always needs to be done." The interaction established immediate mutual recognition between military veterans who understood that some experiences transcended civilian comprehension. Foster had served 3 tours in Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne, witnessing combat that haunted his dreams years after discharge. But Chen's scarring suggested operations in theaters where official American forces had never deployed. Cell assignment placed Chen in D Block, Riverside's most dangerous housing unit, where violent offenders and gang leaders maintained unofficial hierarchies through intimidation and systematic brutality. His cellmate was Tommy "Razor" Rodriguez, a career criminal serving 3 consecutive life sentences for murders committed during gang enforcement operations. Razor attempted to establish dominance before Chen had fully entered their shared 8x10 concrete box. At 34, Rodriguez had survived 12 years in maximum security facilities by projecting aggressive unpredictability that discouraged challenges to his authority. His scarred face and heavily tattooed arms advertised violent capabilities that most inmates respected rather than tested. "Fresh meat," Razor sneered, positioning himself to block Chen's access to the lower bunk that represented premium real estate in their confined world. "Hope you brought commissary money, because rent's due every week. Protection costs extra, but it's worth every penny when things get ugly." Chen set his meager belongings on the upper bunk with deliberate precision, his movements suggesting controlled strength rather than submission to intimidation. "I prefer quiet neighbors," he replied without making eye contact. "Are you going to be a problem, or can we coexist peacefully?" The response puzzled Rodriguez, who had expected either immediate submission or defensive aggression from a new cellmate. Chen's calm confidence suggested either supreme naivety about prison dynamics or capabilities that made territorial disputes irrelevant. "You don't understand how things work here," Rodriguez continued, pressing his perceived advantage. "This is my cell. You're just visiting until I decide otherwise. Show proper respect, and maybe I'll let you sleep tonight without interruption." Chen turned slowly to face his cellmate, revealing eyes that had witnessed horrors Rodriguez couldn't imagine. The eye contact lasted exactly 3 seconds before Chen returned to organizing his belongings, but something in that brief exchange fundamentally altered the cell's power dynamic. From his position across the corridor, Marcus "Big Mike" Torres observed the interaction with professional interest. At 41, Torres had controlled D Block's criminal activities for 7 years through a combination of strategic violence and organizational sophistication that impressed even veteran corrections officers. His network included 20 dedicated soldiers who maintained order through systematic intimidation and brutal enforcement of his personal authority. Torres understood that new inmates represented either potential assets or existential threats to his carefully maintained power structure. Chen's calm behavior under Rodriguez's pressure suggested capabilities that required immediate assessment and appropriate response. The new fish would either submit to established hierarchy or be eliminated before his presence destabilized the delicate balance Torres had spent years perfecting. The first meal service provided Torres with his initial opportunity to evaluate Chen's position within D Block's social structure. The cafeteria operated according to unwritten rules that determined seating arrangements, conversation protocols, and behavioral expectations. Violations of these customs typically resulted in swift and memorable punishment. Chen selected his meal tray and found an empty table near the cafeteria's eastern wall. Positioning himself with clear sight lines to multiple exits, while avoiding territories controlled by established gangs. His choice demonstrated tactical awareness that impressed Torres while raising questions about Chen's background and potential capabilities. Torres approached with his inner circle, their movement creating obvious intimidation as conversations fell silent and inmates quickly vacated nearby tables. The demonstration was designed to establish Torres's authority, while testing Chen's response to overwhelming social pressure in an environment where weakness invited predation. New fish needs education about local customs. Torres announced loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear clearly. 10% of commissary goes to leadership for administrative purposes. Protection services cost extra, but they're essential for maintaining personal safety in challenging institutional environments. Chen continued eating his meal with mechanical precision, showing no acknowledgement of Torres's presence or demands. The lack of response violated every expectation about appropriate behavior during such encounters, creating tension that rippled through the observing inmates. Respect is earned through service to established authority, Torres continued, his voice carrying subtle menace that experienced prisoners recognized as preliminary warning before violence escalated. Cooperation ensures comfortable accommodation. Resistance creates unnecessary complications for everyone involved. Chen lifted his eyes to meet Torres's gaze with steady attention that revealed nothing about his emotional state or intentions. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly despite its quiet delivery, creating dramatic contrast with Torres's theatrical intimidation. "I don't pay for protection I don't need," Chen replied simply. "And I don't serve anyone but myself." The statement created absolute silence in the cafeteria as inmates processed the implications of such direct defiance. Torres's authority had never been challenged so openly by someone who lacked obvious gang affiliation or institutional protection. The response demanded immediate action to prevent erosion of his carefully maintained dominance. But something in Chen's demeanor gave Torres pause, preventing the explosive violence that typically followed such provocations. Years of criminal leadership had taught Torres to recognize dangerous opponents who required strategic rather than impulsive responses. Chen's calm confidence suggested capabilities that warranted careful assessment before direct confrontation. "Interesting perspective," Torres said after a long moment, his smile failing to reach his eyes. "We'll continue this conversation when you've had time to better understand local dynamics." The tactical withdrawal allowed Torres to maintain face while postponing immediate violence. But inmates throughout the cafeteria recognized the unprecedented nature of his restrained response. Chen had achieved something no previous challenger had managed, forcing the undisputed king of D Block to reconsider his approach to establishing dominance. As evening lockdown approached, Chen prepared for his first night in Riverside with systematic attention to security details that would determine his survival in an environment designed to favor predators over prey. The shower incident was still months away, but the foundations for that confrontation were being established through every interaction, every assessment, every moment of tactical preparation that defined life in maximum security incarceration. The fluorescent lights dimmed throughout D Block as corrections officers completed their evening count, unaware that they had just witnessed the opening moves of a conflict that would reshape the facility's power structure through violence that exceeded anything in Riverside's institutional memory. 2 weeks into his sentence at Riverside Maximum Security Penitentiary, Marcus Chen's refusal to participate in Big Mike Torres's established power structure had created ripples of tension throughout D-Block that threatened to destabilize 7 years of carefully maintained criminal hierarchy. Small provocations escalated with systematic precision as Torres tested Chen's resolve through increasingly aggressive harassment designed to force submission or justify overwhelming retaliation. The campaign began with subtle intimidation that avoided direct confrontation while demonstrating Torres's extensive influence throughout the facility. Chen's commissary orders were mysteriously delayed or canceled entirely, forcing him to survive on basic institutional meals that barely provided adequate nutrition. His mail disappeared during processing, severing communication with the outside world that might provide emotional support or legal assistance. Inmates under Torres's control began implementing coordinated harassment during daily activities. They would accidentally bump into Chen during meal service, spilling food across his uniform while offering insincere apologies that fooled no one. During yard time, groups of men would position themselves to block his access to exercise equipment or recreational areas, creating constant low-level stress through territorial dominance. Chen observed each escalation with the systematic attention of a military intelligence analyst, cataloging patterns and identifying command structures within Torres's organization. His special forces training had included extensive instruction in resistance to interrogation and psychological pressure, techniques that proved equally applicable to civilian incarceration. The harassment reached a critical threshold when Chen discovered that someone had contaminated his soap with industrial cleaning chemicals, creating a caustic mixture that would cause severe chemical burns if used for personal hygiene. The sabotage represented a significant escalation from psychological intimidation to physical assault, crossing lines that demanded immediate response. Chen's cellmate Tommy Razor Rodriguez had been increasingly nervous as he witnessed the systematic pressure campaign against his new roommate. Rodriguez understood Torres's methods intimately, having participated in similar operations against previous targets who had challenged established authority. But something about Chen's calm response to mounting pressure created anxiety that Rodriguez couldn't adequately explain. "You need to make peace with Big Mike," Rodriguez whispered during evening lockdown, his voice carrying genuine concern rather than typical criminal manipulation. "This isn't going away. He's building towards something major, and you're not going to like how it ends." Chen appreciated the warning while maintaining his commitment to handling the situation through direct action rather than submission to extortion. "I understand the dynamics," he replied quietly. "Torres needs to establish dominance through public demonstration. The question is whether he's prepared for the full cost of that demonstration." Rodriguez studied his cellmate's expression, recognizing something in Chen's eyes that triggered survival instincts developed through 12 years of maximum security incarceration. The calm confidence wasn't bravado or ignorance about prison violence. It was the quiet assurance of someone who possessed capabilities that made numerical superiority irrelevant. The soap incident demanded immediate response that would establish boundaries without triggering premature escalation to lethal violence. Chen waited until shower time to address the sabotage, choosing a moment when multiple witnesses would observe his handling of deliberate assault through chemical weapons. Rodriguez entered the shower area with obvious reluctance, understanding that his theft of Chen's soap had been orchestrated by Torres as a test of Chen's willingness to defend himself against direct provocation. The gang leader needed to know whether Chen would tolerate physical assault or respond with violence that could justify overwhelming retaliation. Chen approached Rodriguez with movements that suggested controlled strength rather than aggressive intent, creating psychological pressure through proximity without obvious threatening behavior. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly despite the ambient noise of running water. "I believe you have something that belongs to me," Chen said simply, positioning himself to control Rodriguez's movement options while avoiding postures that guards might interpret as aggressive assault preparation. Rodriguez attempted to maintain defiance, despite growing anxiety about the confrontation he had been ordered to initiate. "Don't know what you're talking about, new fish. Maybe you should be more careful with your personal property," Chen's response demonstrated surgical application of pressure point techniques that left no visible injuries while creating immediate compliance through precisely controlled pain. His grip on Rodriguez's wrist applied exactly enough force to compress nerve clusters without causing permanent damage. "Let me rephrase the question," Chen continued, his voice remaining conversational despite the obvious physical control he had established over his opponent. "Where is my soap, and what did you contaminate it with?" The technique was designed to extract information while demonstrating capabilities that would discourage future provocations. Rodriguez found himself unable to resist the precise application of military-trained joint manipulation that turned his own nervous system against him. "Industrial degreaser," Rodriguez gasped, his defiance crumbling under controlled application of non-lethal force. "Torres wanted to see how you'd handle direct assault. Chemical burns would put you in medical isolation where his people could finish the job quietly." Chen released the pressure while maintaining positional control, allowing Rodriguez to recover circulation while preventing escape or counterattack. The information confirmed that Torres was escalating toward lethal violence, making Chen's situation increasingly urgent. "Touch my property again," Chen whispered with quiet intensity that carried clearly despite the shower noise. "And I'll demonstrate why the army taught me 47 ways to kill a man with bare hands. Are we clear on this point?" Rodriguez nodded frantically, his respect for Chen's capabilities now based on direct experience rather than theoretical assessment. The demonstration had been precisely calculated to establish boundaries without creating injuries that would trigger administrative investigation or gang retaliation. The incident reached Torres through his network of informants within minutes of its conclusion, confirming that Chen possessed military training that could disrupt the careful balance of power Torres had maintained for 7 years. The gang leader realized he was facing an opponent whose capabilities exceeded anything in his previous experience with prison violence. Sergeant Mike Foster witnessed the shower encounter between Chen and Rodriguez, but chose not to file an official report after observing the systematic nature of Chen's response to obvious provocation. Foster's military experience recognized professional restraint in Chen's handling of a situation that could have escalated to serious violence. That was textbook application of non-lethal force. Foster told his partner during their post-shift debriefing, Chen could have seriously injured Rodriguez but chose minimal necessary response to establish defensive boundaries. Someone taught him proper escalation protocols. Foster's assessment influenced official documentation of the incident, ensuring that administrative records reflected Rodriguez as the aggressor, while noting Chen's measured response to direct assault. The protection would prove crucial as Torres prepared more serious provocations designed to justify overwhelming retaliation. Dr. Sarah Williams attempted additional psychological evaluation sessions with Chen following reports of increasing tension around his cell assignment. Her questions probed his emotional state and potential for violent escalation, seeking early warning signs of psychological breakdown under institutional pressure. The adjustment period can be particularly challenging for inmates with military backgrounds, Williams observed during their session. Combat veterans sometimes struggle with the transition from structured military environment to civilian incarceration with different authority structures. Chen's responses revealed sophisticated understanding of psychological evaluation techniques while maintaining operational security about his actual mental state and preparation for inevitable violence. "I find institutional structure familiar rather than challenging, Doctor. Military discipline translates well to correctional environments." The answer concealed Chen's systematic preparation for combat while providing truthful responses about his psychological adaptation to incarceration. Williams noted his exceptional emotional regulation, but missed the underlying tension of someone preparing for life-threatening confrontation. Torres decided to escalate pressure through systematic harassment that would break Chen's resistance or provide justification for the spectacular violence that would re-establish his dominance throughout D-Block. The campaign intensified with coordinated surveillance designed to create psychological stress through constant observation. Chen adapted to each escalation with military precision, developing counter-surveillance techniques that identified Torres's watchers while creating uncertainty about his own activities and capabilities. His special forces training had included extensive instruction in operating under hostile observation, skills that proved directly applicable to prison surveillance. The psychological pressure campaign culminated when Torres arranged for Chen's dinner to be contaminated with industrial cleaning chemicals during meal preparation. The attempted poisoning represented another significant escalation that demanded immediate response, while revealing the extent of Torres's corruption within the facility's staff. Chen detected the chemical contamination through careful sensory evaluation of his meal, noting the distinctive odor and unusual discoloration that indicated dangerous adulteration. His survival training had included instruction in identifying various toxins and chemical weapons, knowledge that potentially saved his life. "Sergeant Foster," Chen called quietly during meal service, maintaining calm demeanor while summoning assistance for what represented attempted murder through poisoning. "I believe someone wants me to have severe digestive distress. You might want to test the meatloaf." Foster's investigation confirmed extensive chemical contamination that would have caused serious internal injuries if consumed, validating Chen's assessment while triggering administrative scrutiny of meal preparation security. The incident escalated concerns about Chen's safety and potential for violent retaliation. The failed poisoning attempt convinced Chen that Torres wouldn't be satisfied with mere submission or accommodation within existing power structures. The gang leader viewed him as an existential threat that required elimination rather than integration into established criminal hierarchy. Chen's psychological preparation shifted from defensive resistance to offensive planning, as he recognized that survival required proactive measures rather than reactive adaptation to Torres's escalating violence. His military training activated automatic responses designed for hostile environments where enemy forces possessed overwhelming advantages. The knowledge that violence was inevitable triggered systematic mental conditioning that Chen had learned during Special Forces selection and advanced combat training. His emotional state transitioned from normal civilian psychology to the focused aggression required for survival against overwhelming odds in confined environments. Torres observed Chen's subtle behavioral changes, with growing anxiety about the confrontation he had initiated, but could no longer control through normal intimidation techniques. The gang leader realized he had committed to a course of action that would determine not just Chen's fate, but the future of his own criminal empire within Riverside's walls. The stage was set for systematic violence that would test whether 7 years of prison dominance could overcome 20 years of military training designed to create apex predators capable of surviving impossible odds through surgical application of lethal force. Marcus Chen began systematic intelligence collection about Big Mike Torres's criminal organization with the methodical precision that had defined his 20 years of Special Forces operations in hostile territories. His military training provided analytical frameworks for assessing enemy capabilities, identifying strategic vulnerabilities, and developing operational plans that could exploit structural weaknesses in seemingly overwhelming opposition forces. The initial phase focused on mapping Torres's daily routines through careful observation during scheduled activities. Chen noted that the gang leader maintained rigid patterns that reflected both operational security concerns and personal habits developed over 7 years of institutional dominance. Torres conducted business meetings in specific locations at predictable times, creating opportunities for surveillance and intelligence gathering. During morning meal service, Torres held court at his designated table near the cafeteria's western wall, where his position provided clear sight lines to multiple entrances while demonstrating his authority through territorial control. The seating arrangement revealed organizational hierarchy, as lieutenants occupied positions based on their status within the criminal structure. Chen cataloged the faces and behavioral patterns of Torres's inner circle, identifying 20 core members who formed the operational backbone of D-Block's criminal activities. Each individual displayed distinct characteristics that suggested specific roles within the organization. Some showed signs of extensive combat experience, while others appeared to handle administrative functions like communications and resource distribution. The systematic observation revealed that Torres maintained power through a sophisticated combination of violence, corruption, and information control that extended far beyond simple prison gang activities. His influence reached into every aspect of D-Block operations, from meal preparation to work assignments, creating a shadow administration that functioned parallel to official institutional authority. Chen's cellmate, Tommy Razor Rodriguez, became an unwitting intelligence source through casual conversations about prison hierarchy and organizational dynamics. Rodriguez's 7-year tenure in D Block provided historical context that helped Chen understand how Torres had consolidated power and eliminated previous challenges to his authority. Big Mike wasn't always the king, Rodriguez confided during evening lockdown, his voice barely audible to avoid detection by Torres's surveillance network. When he first arrived, 3 different gangs controlled different sections. It took him 2 years of strategic violence to eliminate the competition and unify everything under his control. The information revealed Torres's tactical sophistication and willingness to engage in sustained conflict to achieve strategic objectives. Chen noted that the gang leader possessed patience and planning capabilities that exceeded typical criminal leadership, suggesting military or law enforcement background that warranted careful assessment. Rodriguez's casual observations provided crucial intelligence about Torres's financial operations and external connections that sustained his criminal empire within Riverside's walls. The commissary kickbacks are just pocket change, Rodriguez explained. Real money comes from moving contraband and coordinating with outside partners who handle distribution networks. Chen learned that Torres's power extended beyond D Block through alliances with gang leaders in other housing units and corruption of key administrative personnel throughout the facility. The scope of criminal organization impressed him with its complexity, while revealing systemic vulnerabilities that could be exploited through strategic intervention. Dr. Sarah Williams attempted to use therapy sessions to understand Chen's increasing withdrawal and hypervigilant behavior, but his responses became more guarded as he mentally prepared for the inevitable confrontation with Torres's organization. His military training emphasized operational security that prevented disclosure of intelligence-gathering activities. "You seem to be isolating yourself from other inmates," Williams observed during their weekly session. "Social connection is important for psychological health in institutional settings. Have you considered participating in group activities or educational programs?" Chen's response maintained his cover while providing truthful assessment of his social strategy. "I prefer solitude, doctor. Group dynamics create complications I'd rather avoid during my adjustment period." The conversation concealed Chen's systematic preparation for violence, while maintaining his facade of passive adaptation to institutional life. Williams noted his responses but missed the underlying indicators of someone conducting military-style intelligence operations against hostile forces. Chen identified 3 critical vulnerabilities in Torres's organizational structure through careful analysis of communication patterns and decision-making processes. The gang's dependency on corrupted guards for intelligence created single points of failure that could be exploited to disrupt their information networks. The concentration of authority around Torres personally meant that eliminating or neutralizing the gang leader would create immediate power vacuum and organizational chaos. Unlike military units with established succession protocols, criminal organizations typically collapsed when their charismatic leaders were removed from operational command. Torres's soldiers demonstrated impressive coordination during routine activities, but Chen's assessment concluded that their effectiveness stemmed from numerical superiority and environmental advantages rather than individual combat capabilities. Most gang members lacked genuine military training despite their reputation for prison violence. Sergeant Mike Foster began monitoring Chen more closely after observing his systematic observation patterns and strategic positioning during daily activities. Foster's military experience recognized behaviors consistent with intelligence gathering and target assessment operations. "You're cataloging security procedures and personnel patterns," Foster observed during a private conversation outside the medical unit. That level of systematic observation suggests operational planning rather than casual adaptation to institutional routines. Chen maintained operational security while acknowledging Foster's perceptiveness and military background. "Old habits from military service, Sergeant." Situational awareness becomes automatic after 20 years of training in threat assessment and environmental analysis. The exchange established mutual respect between veterans, while alerting Foster to potential security concerns developing around Chen's presence in D Block. Foster understood that Chen's intelligence gathering could indicate either defensive preparation or offensive planning against Torres's organization. Chen's analysis revealed that Torres planned to eliminate him during the weekly shower period, when minimal guard supervision and environmental conditions would provide plausible deniability for violence disguised as accidental injury. The timing would coincide with new inmate arrivals who would witness Torres's demonstration of power. The intelligence indicated that Torres intended to use overwhelming force in a confined environment where Chen's military training would be negated by numerical superiority and tactical disadvantages. The gang leader's plan represented sound strategy based on accurate assessment of Chen's individual capabilities. Rodriguez provided additional intelligence about Torres's coordination with corrupted guards to ensure minimal supervision during the planned assault. Big Mike's got 3 COs on his payroll, Rodriguez whispered during yard time. They'll make sure the right people are looking the other way when he makes his move. The corruption network included guards who controlled shower scheduling, medical response protocols, and incident reporting procedures. Torres's influence could manipulate official documentation to support claims of self-defense or accidental death during spontaneous altercation. Chen realized he had approximately 1 week to complete his preparations before Torres moved against him with coordinated assault, designed to eliminate the perceived threat to D Block's established power structure. The timeline created urgency while limiting his options for requesting administrative protection or transfer. Dr. Williams noted increasing signs of stress in Chen's behavior during their sessions, but his responses provided no indication of the specific threats he faced or his preparation for violent confrontation. "You seem particularly tense lately," she observed. "Are there specific concerns about your safety or adjustment that we should address?" Chen maintained operational security while providing truthful responses about his psychological state. Institutional environments create constant low-level stress. "Doctor, I'm managing it through meditation and exercise routines that help maintain emotional equilibrium." The response concealed Chen's systematic mental preparation for combat, while avoiding disclosure that might compromise his tactical advantages or trigger administrative intervention that could delay rather than prevent the inevitable confrontation. Foster attempted to gather additional intelligence about Chen's background through unofficial channels, but his inquiries met with administrative silence that confirmed the classified nature of Chen's military service. "Your file's been scrubbed cleaner than anything I've seen," Foster told him during evening rounds. "Whatever you did in the service, somebody wants it kept very quiet." The conversation revealed that Chen's imprisonment served purposes beyond criminal punishment, that external authorities maintained oversight of his institutional treatment through channels invisible to civilian corrections personnel. Foster's military contacts confirmed Chen's Special Forces background, but provided no details about specific operations or current status. Chen's intelligence gathering revealed additional details about Torres's tactical planning and resource allocation for the shower assault. The gang leader had assigned specific roles to each of his 20 soldiers, while coordinating with corrupted guards to ensure optimal conditions for eliminating Chen without triggering serious administrative investigation. The systematic approach impressed Chen with its sophistication, while confirming that Torres possessed strategic planning capabilities that exceeded typical criminal leadership. The gang leader's preparation suggested either military background or extensive experience with coordinated violence in institutional settings. Rodriguez's nervousness increased as he sensed mounting tension around his cellmate and growing pressure from Torres's organization to provide intelligence about Chen's activities and psychological state. "Big Mike's been asking questions about you," Rodriguez warned during evening lockdown. "Wants to know if you've got friends on the outside. Family members who might cause problems if something happens to you." The intelligence confirmed that Torres was conducting background research to assess potential consequences of eliminating Chen, demonstrating sophisticated operational planning that considered external ramifications beyond immediate tactical objectives. Chen's assessment concluded that Torres's assault would occur within 72 hours, based on coordination patterns and resource positioning observed throughout D Block. The gang leader's preparation was reaching final stages. creating immediate urgency for Chen's own tactical planning and psychological conditioning for extreme violence. The knowledge that professional-level coordinated assault was imminent triggered systematic mental preparation that Chen had learned during Special Forces selection and advanced combat training. His psychological state began transitioning from normal civilian adaptation to the focused aggression required for survival against overwhelming odds in hostile environments. The intelligence gathering phase was complete, providing Chen with comprehensive understanding of enemy capabilities, tactical plans, and operational timeline. The next phase would require translating that intelligence into defensive preparations that could transform Torres's carefully planned ambush into a killing ground where military training would prove superior to criminal organization and numerical advantage. Big Mike Torres finalized his operational plans for Marcus Chen's elimination during the pre-dawn hours of what would become the most significant day in D Block's 7-year history under his control. The gang leader had spent 3 weeks coordinating resources, manipulating schedules, and positioning personnel for an assault designed to appear spontaneous, while ensuring Chen's death through overwhelming coordinated violence. The shower facility represented the optimal tactical environment for Torres's purposes, combining minimal guard supervision with environmental conditions that would support claims of accidental death during spontaneous altercation. Wet surfaces created plausible explanations for fatal injuries, while steam from multiple shower heads would obscure visual evidence that might contradict official narratives. Torres conducted his final briefing with the 20 soldiers selected for the assault, emphasizing the importance of coordinated timing and maintaining operational security until the moment of execution. Each man understood his specific role in the systematic elimination of an opponent whose military background represented an existential threat to their criminal organization. Chen thinks Special Forces training makes him dangerous. Torres addressed his assembled lieutenants in the maintenance storage room, where they could speak without electronic surveillance. Military discipline works in war zones with rules of engagement and backup support. Prison operates by different principles entirely. The briefing revealed Torres's fundamental misunderstanding of Chen's capabilities while demonstrating the sophistication of his tactical planning. The gang leader had analyzed Chen's behavioral patterns and identified the shower period as his moment of maximum vulnerability, when isolation and environmental factors would negate individual combat advantages. Corrupted guards had received their final instructions through coded communications that ensured minimal competent supervision during the planned assault. Sergeant Mike Foster's duty assignment had been manipulated through administrative channels to place him in a different section of the facility during the critical time period. Officer James Mitchell, a 5-year corrections veteran whose gambling debts had made him vulnerable to Torres's financial leverage, reviewed the modified duty roster with growing anxiety about his complicity in what he suspected would be a serious assault. His instructions were simple but morally devastating. Routine equipment inspection in the East Wing. Mitchell read from his assignment sheet, understanding that the bureaucratic language concealed his removal from potential oversight of violence in D Block's shower facility. Duration, approximately 2 hours, beginning at 1400 hours. The timing ensured that Mitchell would be documenting inventory in a storage facility, while Torres's assault eliminated Chen with minimal risk of intervention by personnel whose integrity couldn't be compromised through financial pressure or intimidation. Dr. Sarah Williams conducted what she didn't realize would be Chen's final psychological evaluation before the confrontation, noting increased signs of hypervigilance and stress that suggested mounting pressure from unknown sources within the institutional environment. "You seem particularly tense during our recent sessions," Williams observed, studying Chen's body language for indicators of psychological distress or potential for violent acting out. "Are you experiencing specific threats or concerns that we should address through administrative channels?" Chen maintained operational security while providing truthful responses that didn't reveal his knowledge of Torres's assassination plans or his own systematic preparation for extreme violence. "Institutional life creates constant environmental stress, Doctor. I'm managing it through meditation and physical conditioning that help maintain psychological equilibrium." The response concealed Chen's military-trained mental preparation for combat situations where survival required immediate transition from normal civilian psychology to the focused aggression designed for killing trained opponents. Under adverse conditions, Williams noted Chen's responses in her clinical files, but missed the underlying indicators of someone conducting final psychological preparation for life-threatening combat. Her civilian training in institutional psychology hadn't included recognition of military conditioning for extreme violence in hostile environments. Chen detected the operational coordination through subtle changes in guard behavior and timing irregularities in daily routines that his Special Forces training had taught him to recognize as indicators of enemy preparation for coordinated assault operations. The manipulation of Foster's duty assignment confirmed Chen's assessment that Torres possessed corruption networks capable of influencing official schedules to create optimal conditions for violence. The systematic nature of the preparation impressed him while validating his decision to prepare for immediate deadly force rather than administrative protection. Chen's final preparations included psychological conditioning techniques designed to optimize performance during combat against overwhelming odds in confined environments. His mental state began transitioning from normal institutional adaptation to the controlled aggression required for systematic elimination of multiple opponents. Tommy Razor Rodriguez became increasingly nervous as he sensed mounting tension around his cellmate and growing pressure from Torres's organization to provide intelligence about Chen's psychological state and potential defensive capabilities. "You should request protective custody," Rodriguez suggested during evening lockdown, his voice carrying genuine concern rather than typical criminal manipulation. "Big Mike's planning something major tomorrow, real major. The kind of thing that ends with body bags and administrative investigations." Chen appreciated the warning while maintaining his commitment to handle the situation through direct action rather than administrative intervention that would only delay the inevitable confrontation while alerting Torres to his awareness of the planned assault. "I understand the dynamics," Chen replied quietly, his voice carrying undertones that made Rodriguez unconsciously step back from his cellmate. "Torres needs to eliminate me to maintain his authority. The question is whether he's prepared for the full cost of that demonstration." The response revealed psychological preparation that Rodriguez recognized as far more dangerous than typical prison bravado. Chen's calm confidence suggested capabilities that made numerical superiority and environmental advantages irrelevant to the outcome of their confrontation. Torres received final confirmation from his corrupted guards that all administrative obstacles had been removed for the following day's operation. Foster would be conducting equipment inventory in a different facility section. Medical response protocols had been adjusted to ensure delayed emergency treatment. Incident reporting procedures would route through personnel sympathetic to Torres's organizational interests. "Everything's aligned," Torres told his inner circle during their final coordination meeting. Chen will be isolated in the shower facility with minimal supervision and optimal conditions for ending this threat permanently. The briefing confirmed systematic preparation that extended far beyond simple gang violence into sophisticated operational planning that considered administrative responses, evidence management, and long-term consequences of eliminating a perceived threat to established authority. Chen spent his final evening before the assault in meditation and tactical visualization, mentally rehearsing combat scenarios and outcome probabilities based on his assessment of Torres's capabilities and tactical approach. His psychological conditioning emphasized emotional detachment required for extreme violence against multiple opponents. His Special Forces training had included extensive preparation for combat situations where survival required immediate elimination of threats without hesitation or moral qualms that could compromise tactical effectiveness. The mental conditioning designed to create controlled killing capacity began activating automatically. Dr. Williams reviewed Chen's psychological profile during her evening documentation, noting increased stress indicators and behavioral changes that suggested mounting pressure from unknown environmental factors. Her recommendations emphasized continued observation and potential intervention if his condition deteriorated further. Subject demonstrates exceptional stress management despite apparent environmental pressures, Williams wrote in her clinical assessment. recommend enhanced monitoring and administrative review of potential security concerns affecting subjects' institutional adjustment. The evaluation would reach administrative review the day after Torres's planned assault, ensuring that concerns about Chen's safety arrived too late to prevent the violence that both sides recognized as inevitable. Foster attempted to maintain oversight of D-Block operations despite his reassignment, but administrative protocols prevented him from accessing security footage or duty rosters that might reveal the systematic manipulation of his normal responsibilities. "Something's wrong with tomorrow's assignments," Foster told his supervisor during shift change briefing. Chen's been under increasing pressure, and removing experienced oversight during shower periods creates unnecessary security risks. The concern was noted in official records but dismissed as routine personnel rotation rather than recognition of systematic preparation for coordinated assault. Foster's military instincts recognized manipulation tactics, but civilian administrative structure prevented effective intervention. Chen conducted his final intelligence assessment of Torres's tactical preparation, confirming that the assault would occur during afternoon shower period with 20 coordinated attackers, in a confined space designed to maximize their numerical advantage while minimizing his defensive options. The systematic nature of Torres's planning impressed Chen, while validating his assessment that the gang leader possessed strategic capabilities that exceeded typical criminal leadership. The confrontation would test whether 7 years of prison dominance could overcome 20 years of military training designed for impossible odds. Morning count proceeded normally as Torres's soldiers positioned themselves according to their assigned roles, their behavior showing subtle coordination that Chen observed with professional assessment of enemy preparation and tactical readiness. The trap was set with precision that reflected months of planning and resource coordination. But Torres had made one fundamental miscalculation about his opponent's capabilities and psychological conditioning for extreme violence in hostile environments. Chen understood that the next few hours would determine not just his survival, but the future power structure of D-Block and the extent to which military training could overcome overwhelming numerical superiority through systematic application of lethal force designed for eliminating trained opponents. The morning of the assault arrived with deceptive normalcy, concealing the preparations both sides had made for a confrontation that would demonstrate why Special Forces operators were considered apex predators in any combat environment, regardless of numerical odds or tactical disadvantages. Morning count proceeded with deceptive normalcy as Big Mike Torres's 20 soldiers positioned themselves throughout D-Block according to their carefully rehearsed assignments. Marcus Chen observed the subtle coordination with the professional assessment of a career military operator who had survived 2 decades of combat operations in hostile territories where recognizing enemy preparation meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. During breakfast service, tension permeated the cafeteria atmosphere as inmates sensed impending violence without understanding its specific nature or scope. Conversations carried undertones of nervous energy, while territorial boundaries became more rigidly defined as various groups prepared for potential spillover effects from whatever confrontation was developing around the mysterious new fish who had dared challenge Torres's established authority. Chen selected his meal tray and consumed his food with mechanical precision, conducting final intelligence assessment of his opponents while maintaining the appearance of normal institutional routine. His systematic observation cataloged facial expressions, body language, and positioning patterns that confirmed Torres's assault would occur during the afternoon shower period. The gang leader's soldiers displayed subtle coordination that revealed extensive preparation and role assignment for their upcoming operation. Some showed signs of nervous anticipation, while others maintained professional calm that suggested genuine combat experience beyond typical prison violence. Their collective behavior indicated systematic preparation rather than spontaneous aggression. Torres approached Chen's table with deliberate provocation, designed to create public justification for the coming assault, while demonstrating his authority to observing inmates who would serve as witnesses to whatever narrative emerged from the confrontation. "Today feels different," Torres announced with theatrical confidence, his voice carrying clearly across the cafeteria to ensure maximum audience for his performance. Like the kind of day when problems get solved permanently and new understandings develop about proper respect for established authority. Chen met Torres's gaze without emotion while continuing to eat his meal with steady precision that contrasted sharply with the aggressive energy radiating from the gang leader and his assembled followers. When he spoke, his voice carried quietly but with clarity that reached every listening ear. "Education can be expensive," Chen replied simply, his tone suggesting complete awareness of the stakes while maintaining calm acceptance of whatever consequences would emerge from their confrontation. "Are you prepared to pay the full cost of the lesson you're planning to teach?" The exchange confirmed both men understood the deadly stakes while maintaining plausible deniability for any guards who might later question the circumstances leading to violence. Torres's confidence reflected 7 years of successful intimidation through overwhelming force, while Chen's calm suggested capabilities that made numerical superiority irrelevant. Administrative manipulation reached its final phase as corrupted guards implemented duty roster changes designed to ensure minimal, competent supervision during the planned assault. Sergeant Mike Foster found himself assigned to equipment inventory in the facility's eastern storage complex, effectively removing the most experienced military veteran from potential oversight of D-block operations. Foster's attempts to maintain awareness of developing situations met with bureaucratic obstacles that confirmed systematic coordination to isolate Chen from potential assistance. His requests for schedule modifications were denied through administrative channels that Torres's corruption network had influenced for months. "I need to maintain oversight of D-block today," Foster told the duty supervisor with growing urgency about circumstances he couldn't fully explain without compromising Chen's operational security. "There are developing tensions that require experienced personnel management to prevent serious incidents." The request was documented in official records, but dismissed as routine personnel concerns rather than recognition of systematic preparation for coordinated assault. Foster's military instincts recognized manipulation tactics, but civilian administrative protocols prevented effective intervention. Shower time arrived with carefully orchestrated timing that placed Torres's corrupted personnel in supervisory positions while removing honest guards who might interfere with planned violence. The facility's routine operations concealed systematic preparation for an assault designed to appear spontaneous during investigation. Chen entered the shower area with complete awareness of the trap, while maintaining normal behavioral patterns that wouldn't alert observers to his tactical readiness. His psychological state had transitioned to combat conditioning, as autonomic responses prepared his body for extreme violence against overwhelming odds. The shower facility's environmental conditions favored Torres's tactical approach through confined space that limited Chen's movement options, while providing numerical superiority with optimal positioning for coordinated assault. Steam from multiple shower heads would create visual obscuration that complicated witness testimony about subsequent events. 20 inmates entered the facility in carefully timed sequence designed to surround Chen before he could recognize the full scope of the threat or position himself for optimal defensive response. Their coordination reflected weeks of preparation and role assignment for systematic elimination of a perceived threat. Chen positioned himself strategically while conducting normal shower activities, using his peripheral vision to track enemy movements while maintaining the appearance of routine personal hygiene. His special forces training had included close-quarters combat in confined spaces where environmental factors determined tactical advantage through strategic positioning and situational awareness. Steam began rising from the shower area as hot water mixed with cooler air, creating atmospheric conditions that would obscure visual details while amplifying acoustic effects of whatever violence would follow. The environment favored attackers who possessed numerical superiority over individual defenders relying on tactical skill. Torres's soldiers completed their encirclement with professional timing that impressed Chen, despite his recognition that their coordination would prove insufficient against military-trained combat reflexes designed for impossible odds. Their confidence reflected successful intimidation campaigns rather than genuine understanding of their opponent's capabilities. "Nowhere to run now, military boy," Torres announced as his men assumed final positions. his voice echoing off wet concrete walls with authority earned through 7 years of systematic violence against opponents who lacked Chen's training and psychological conditioning. Chen slowly turned to face his assembled opponents, water cascading down his scarred back as steam swirled around the developing confrontation. His movement was deliberate and controlled, revealing none of the explosive potential that 20 years of Special Forces training had developed for exactly these circumstances. The gang leader's satisfaction was evident as he surveyed the tactical situation that represented months of careful planning and resource coordination. 20 loyal soldiers surrounded a single opponent in confined space with minimal supervision and environmental conditions that would support claims of accidental death during spontaneous altercation. "Time to pay for disrespecting the wrong people," Torres continued, his theatrical delivery designed to provide final justification for overwhelming violence while demonstrating his authority to any potential witnesses who might question subsequent events. Chen's response came with quiet intensity that cut through the ambient noise of running water and echoing voices, carrying clearly despite its conversational volume. His psychological conditioning had activated automatic responses designed for survival against trained opponents in hostile environments. "Gentlemen," Chen said calmly, his voice revealing nothing about the lethal capabilities that were about to transform Torres's carefully planned execution into systematic demonstration of why Special Forces operators represented apex predators in any combat environment. The statement hung in the steamy air as 20 men prepared to discover the vast difference between prison violence and military combat training. Torres's confidence reflected fundamental miscalculation about his opponent's psychological conditioning and technical capabilities. Chen's eyes revealed depths that none of his opponents had encountered during their criminal careers, reflecting experiences in theaters, where hesitation meant death and mercy represented luxury that professional warriors couldn't afford during combat operations. "You have no idea what you've just started," Chen continued, his calm delivery contrasting sharply with the aggressive posturing of men who had never faced genuine military opposition in environments where individual skill determined survival. Torres triggered the assault with a gesture that sent his 20 soldiers forward in coordinated attack, designed to overwhelm Chen through sheer numbers and environmental disadvantage. Their movement reflected weeks of preparation and confidence earned through successful intimidation campaigns against unprepared opponents. Chen's response would demonstrate why Special Forces selection emphasized combat effectiveness against impossible odds, why military training created warriors capable of systematic violence that transcended normal human limitations through psychological conditioning and technical expertise developed over decades of professional warfare. The confined shower space was about to become a demonstration of the fundamental difference between criminal violence and military lethality, between numerical superiority and professional competence, between prison intimidation and combat training designed for eliminating trained opponents under adverse conditions. Steam continued rising around the confrontation as 20 men discovered they had initiated combat against an opponent whose capabilities exceeded anything in their collective experience with institutional violence, whose training had prepared him for exactly these circumstances through systematic conditioning for extreme aggression in hostile environments. The systematic elimination was about to begin, transforming Torres's planned execution into educational demonstration of why experienced warriors represented forces of nature that criminal organizations couldn't comprehend or effectively oppose through conventional intimidation tactics. The first attacker reached Chen with predatory confidence, wielding a sharpened toothbrush handle that gleamed with deadly intent in the fluorescent lighting. His movement telegraphed aggression honed through years of prison violence. But Chen's response demonstrated the vast chasm between criminal brutality and military precision trained for eliminating professional opponents. Chen's deflection redirected the improvised weapon with fluid economy of motion, using the attacker's momentum to drive the sharpened plastic deep into the man's own carotid artery. The strike was surgically precise, severing the major blood vessel with anatomical accuracy that ensured rapid unconsciousness while avoiding immediate death. The injured man collapsed against wet tile walls, his lifeblood mixing with shower water as it flowed toward drainage systems designed for far less dramatic purposes. His eyes widened with shock and disbelief as he realized that Torres's carefully planned assault had become his own execution through redirected violence. Steam and spreading blood created visual confusion that favored Chen's training in disorienting combat environments where traditional visual cues became unreliable. His opponent struggled to track his position, while he maintained complete situational awareness through military-developed peripheral vision and auditory discrimination techniques. The second attacker attempted coordinated assault from Chen's apparent blind spot, but discovered that Special Forces training eliminated such tactical vulnerabilities through systematic preparation for multi-directional threats in confined spaces. Chen's response flowed like water around the incoming threat. His foot sweep destroyed the attacker's balance with precise timing that sent the man crashing into unforgiving concrete surfaces. The impact created distinctive sounds of structural failure, as skull met tile with physics that favored immovable architecture over fragile human anatomy. Torres watched his systematic assault plan disintegrate as Chen demonstrated combat capabilities that exceeded anything the gang leader had witnessed during 7 years of prison dominance. The controlled violence revealed training designed for eliminating multiple opponents through efficient application of lethal force. "He's not fighting like normal people," one of Torres's soldiers gasped as he witnessed systematic dismantling of coordinated attack through individual skill that made numerical superiority meaningless. "This isn't prison violence. This is something else entirely." Chen moved through the confined shower space with mechanical precision that conserved energy while maximizing tactical effectiveness against multiple opponents. Each movement served dual purposes, eliminating immediate threats while positioning for subsequent encounters in the developing melee. The third attacker produced a genuine blade smuggled through corrupted guards, but discovered that bringing superior weapons to combat against Chen only provided him with additional tools for systematic violence. The knife changed ownership with fluid motion that demonstrated military training in weapons retention and acquisition. Chen's redirection of the blade found gaps between ribs with professional accuracy that suggested extensive training in human anatomy and vulnerable target identification. The wound was calculated to cause rapid incapacitation while avoiding immediate death that might trigger enhanced administrative investigation. Steam continued rising from multiple shower heads, creating atmospheric conditions that amplified acoustic effects while concealing visual details that might aid Torres's remaining soldiers in coordinating their attacks against an opponent who seemed to move independently of normal. Physical limitations. The fourth attacker hesitated as he witnessed systematic elimination of his comrades through violence that exceeded his comprehension of combat effectiveness. His pause proved fatal, as Chen's strike collapsed his windpipe with anatomical precision designed to cause unconsciousness through oxygen deprivation. Torres attempted to rally his remaining forces through shouted commands that echoed off wet concrete walls, but his authority meant nothing in combat environments where individual skill determined survival, rather than organizational hierarchy or reputation for intimidation. "All of you together!" Torres screamed with desperate fury as he realized his numerical advantage was evaporating through systematic elimination. "Take him down before he kills everyone." Chen's psychological conditioning allowed him to compartmentalize the violence while maintaining tactical assessment of remaining threats and environmental hazards. His Special Forces training emphasized emotional detachment during combat operations to preserve decision-making capability under extreme stress. The fifth attacker discovered that Chen's defensive positioning could instantly transition to offensive action as pressure point strikes targeted nerve clusters that controlled motor function. The technique rendered him unconscious without permanent damage, demonstrating proportional response even during life-threatening circumstances. Shower area acoustics amplified sounds of combat, while steam obscured visual confirmation of Chen's exact position, creating psychological pressure on Torres's remaining soldiers who struggled to coordinate attacks against an opponent who seemed to appear and disappear at will. The sixth man attempted to flee as he recognized the hopelessness of engaging an opponent whose capabilities exceeded anything in his criminal experience. But Chen's military training included preventing enemy withdrawal during active engagement to maintain tactical control. His pursuit ended the escape attempt against tile walls with decisive finality that demonstrated why Special Forces operators were trained to control battlefields through systematic elimination of threats, rather than allowing organized retreat that might enable regrouping. Torres's remaining soldiers began showing signs of panic as they witnessed professional military violence applied against criminal opposition. Their collective experience with prison intimidation had never prepared them for combat against trained warriors, whose capabilities transcended normal human limitations. The seventh attacker swung desperately with a sock filled with batteries, but Chen's deflection redirected the improvised weapon into his companion's temple, with force that created immediate unconsciousness and potential permanent neurological damage. Chen offered surrender terms to surviving attackers, his voice carrying clearly despite the chaos of systematic violence. Drop your weapons and leave. This ends when you choose to end it. The psychological warfare demonstrated military training in using fear as tactical weapon to achieve objectives without unnecessary killing. 3 of Torres's soldiers accepted the offer immediately, abandoning their assault to flee toward safety. Their departure reduced enemy force strength while providing witness testimony that Chen had offered mercy during combat, protecting him from administrative charges of excessive violence during what would be investigated as defensive action against coordinated assault. Torres remained with his 5 most fanatical followers, unwilling to accept defeat that would destroy his 7-year domination of D-Block's criminal hierarchy. His pride overrode tactical judgment as he committed to fighting rather than acknowledging superior opposition. The 8th attacker found his momentum redirected into shower fixtures with force that separated vertebrae, creating permanent paralysis while preserving life. Chen's training emphasized proportional response that achieved tactical objectives without unnecessary lethality when circumstances permitted restraint. Torres produced a genuine knife obtained through extensive corruption of guard personnel, representing his final technological advantage in confrontation that had demonstrated the superiority of individual skill over numerical superiority and environmental disadvantages. Chen's expression remained unchanged as he recognized escalation to lethal weapons, his military conditioning having prepared him for exactly these circumstances through systematic training in disarming opponents with superior equipment through technique and psychological pressure. The 9th attacker hesitated as psychological pressure of witnessing systematic elimination destroyed his unit cohesion completely. His paralysis proved fatal as Chen's strike targeted the base of his skull, severing connections between brain and motor control with surgical precision. 2 final soldiers flanked Chen in desperate coordination that represented their last tactical advantage before individual combat skills would determine the outcome. Their approach demonstrated courage born of desperation rather than tactical confidence. Chen's response to coordinated attack flowed with practiced efficiency, using the confined space to separate his opponents while maintaining defensive positioning that prevented simultaneous assault from multiple directions. The 10th attacker discovered that Chen's elbow strike could generate force sufficient to collapse facial bone structure, creating immediate unconsciousness through traumatic brain injury that would require extensive medical intervention for survival. Torres advanced with his knife while his final supporter attempted to provide distraction, their coordination representing the last organized resistance to Chen's systematic dismantling of their assault force through professional military violence. Steam continued rising around the confrontation as systematic elimination neared completion, transforming Torres's planned execution into educational demonstration of why criminal organizations couldn't effectively oppose military-trained opponents through conventional intimidation or numerical superiority. The shower facility had become a laboratory for demonstrating the fundamental difference between prison violence and combat training designed for eliminating professional opponents under adverse conditions through systematic application of lethal force. Big Mike Torres advanced with his genuine steel blade while his final loyal soldier attempted to coordinate flanking maneuvers that represented their last tactical advantage before individual combat skills would determine the ultimate outcome of 7 years of criminal dominance, confronting 20 years of military training designed for impossible odds. Chen recognized the coordinated assault pattern from Special Forces scenarios that tested close-quarters combat against multiple opponents wielding superior weapons in confined environments. His response demonstrated why military selection emphasized adaptability under adverse conditions that exceeded normal human survival parameters. The flanking attacker reached Chen first with desperate aggression, but discovered that his approach had been anticipated and countered through positioning that transformed his momentum into self-destructive force. Chen's strike targeted the base of his skull with surgical precision that severed neurological connections instantly. Torres committed to his knife attack with deadly intent, understanding that failure meant complete destruction of his power structure within D-Block's criminal hierarchy. His blade sought Chen's heart with practiced accuracy, developed through years of systematic violence against unprepared opponents. Chen's defensive response flowed around Torres's assault, like water redirecting around immovable obstacles, controlling the gang leader's weapon hand while using his own momentum against him. The disarming technique was executed with medical precision that preserved the blade for Chen's tactical advantage. "You were competent," Chen acknowledged as he established control over Torres's knife arm through joint manipulation that caused excruciating pain without permanent damage. "But you learned violence in prison environments." "I learned it during warfare against professional opponents." The psychological statement accompanied systematic demonstration of military-trained pressure point techniques that reduced Torres to helplessness through anatomical knowledge that exceeded civilian understanding of human vulnerability. Each manipulation was calculated to cause maximum compliance, while ensuring survival for administrative questioning. Torres attempted to maintain resistance through willpower alone, but his nervous system betrayed him as Chen applied nerve cluster techniques that overrode conscious control. The gang leader's body responded to scientific pressure application, regardless of his mental determination to continue fighting. Steam continued rising throughout the shower facility as the systematic confrontation neared its conclusion, creating atmospheric effects that would complicate witness testimony while providing visual drama that emphasized the complete reversal of Torres's planned execution into educational demonstration of military superiority. Chen surveyed the tactical environment with professional assessment that cataloged injuries and threat levels among scattered opponents, ensuring no residual dangers remained active, while documenting the scope of defensive action that would require administrative review and potential criminal investigation. His training emphasized post-combat evaluation to prevent surprise attacks from apparently neutralized opponents who might retain combat capability despite visible injuries. The systematic approach reflected decades of experience in hostile environments, where assumptions about enemy status proved fatal. Sergeant Mike Foster arrived with backup guards responding to reports of violence in the shower area. His military experience immediately recognizing professional operation rather than typical prison brutality. The systematic nature of injuries and tactical positioning suggested organized combat rather than spontaneous altercation. "Jesus Christ," Foster breathed as he surveyed the scene that exceeded anything in his corrections experience. "What the hell happened here?" Chen stood motionless amid the systematic devastation, showing no signs of injury despite engaging 20 opponents in close-quarters combat within confined space. His composed demeanor contrasted sharply with the evidence of overwhelming violence that surrounded him. "Self-defense, Sergeant," Chen replied, with calm precision that suggested complete emotional control despite the extreme circumstances. "They initiated coordinated assault with lethal weapons. I responded with appropriate defensive measures to preserve my life." Foster's assessment confirmed that injury patterns supported Chen's explanation of defensive action rather than aggressive assault. The positioning of bodies and weapons placement indicated systematic response to coordinated attack rather than predatory violence against helpless victims. Dr. Sarah Williams arrived with medical personnel to treat wounded attackers, her psychological evaluation of the scene, revealing systematic application of violence consistent with military training, rather than criminal brutality or psychopathic behavior patterns. "This wasn't random institutional violence," Williams told Warden Patricia Hayes during initial briefing about the incident. "Someone with extensive combat training systematically neutralized coordinated assault using precisely measured force designed for incapacitation rather than elimination." Medical examination revealed that despite apparent carnage, most injuries were non-fatal and strategically placed to eliminate combat effectiveness while preserving life. The precision suggested professional restraint, even during life-threatening circumstances that would justify lethal response. Torres regained consciousness in the prison infirmary to discover his 7-year domination of D Block had ended through 15 minutes of systematic violence that demonstrated the futility of criminal organization against military-trained opposition operating under survival conditions. "You don't understand what he is," Torres told investigating guards with desperate intensity born of witnessing capabilities that exceeded his comprehension. "He's not normal human. Military experiment or special operations or something beyond conventional training." The explanation was initially dismissed as face-saving fabrication until medical examination revealed injury patterns consistent with advanced combat techniques rather than typical prison violence. Torres's wounds showed anatomical precision that suggested extensive knowledge of human vulnerability. Warden Hayes conducted private interview with Chen to understand the institutional implications of violence that exceeded anything in Riverside's operational history. Her questions probed his military background and classified aspects of service records that remained beyond her administrative clearance. "Your file indicates extensive special operations experience, with details classified beyond civilian oversight," Hayes observed during their confidential discussion. "Care to explain how that training influenced today's defensive response?" Chen maintained operational security while providing truthful answers that satisfied administrative requirements without compromising classified information. "When 20 men coordinate assault with improvised weapons in confined space, military conditioning activates automatically to preserve life through appropriate defensive measures." Investigation confirmed that Torres had initiated systematic assault with overwhelming force, that Chen's response constituted legitimate self-defense under extreme circumstances, and that his tactical effectiveness reflected professional training rather than criminal intent or excessive violence. Prison rumors spread throughout Riverside's population within hours, as inmates processed the reality that unknown newcomer had single-handedly dismantled D Block's most powerful criminal organization through individual combat capabilities that exceeded institutional experience. The Ghost became Chen's universal designation among inmates who recognized his ability to eliminate threats with supernatural effectiveness while remaining invisible to administrative detection. The nickname reflected both his tactical capabilities and psychological impact on prison population. Foster approached Chen during evening lockdown to discuss broader implications of systematic violence that had fundamentally altered D Block's power structure while establishing Chen as apex predator whose capabilities discouraged future challenges. "You've eliminated Torres's organization, but every gang leader in this facility will eventually test themselves against the man who accomplished what seemed impossible," Foster warned, with professional concern about escalating violence. Chen's response revealed psychological preparation for extended conflict that his military training had designed for sustained operations in hostile territory. Then they'll learn the same educational lesson Torres received. Some opponents possess capabilities that make numerical superiority irrelevant. Administrative review concluded that Chen had acted within legal parameters of self-defense while demonstrating restraint that preserved life despite circumstances that would have justified lethal force against coordinated assault, with weapons in confined environment. The shower incident established new equilibrium within Riverside's population, as inmates recognized that traditional intimidation tactics proved ineffective against opponents whose training exceeded their collective experience with institutional violence. Chen's reputation as systematic elimination specialist created deterrent effect that reduced random violence throughout the facility, while establishing his position as protected individual whose capabilities made retaliation inadvisable for surviving criminal organizations. Medical treatment of Torres's soldiers revealed extensive injuries that would require months of recovery, while serving as permanent reminder of consequences for challenging military-trained opponents through conventional criminal tactics. Torres himself remained hospitalized with injuries that ended his physical capacity for leadership, while his organization collapsed completely due to loss of charismatic authority and fear of association with spectacular failure. The systematic demonstration had transformed Chen from unknown newcomer into legendary figure whose combat capabilities would influence Riverside's social dynamics for years beyond his eventual release through administrative channels that remained classified beyond civilian oversight. Steam still rose from showerheads as cleanup crews documented evidence of systematic violence that would be studied by corrections professionals seeking to understand how individual training could overcome overwhelming numerical superiority through tactical excellence and psychological conditioning. Chen returned to his cell with knowledge that his survival had been purchased through demonstration of capabilities that would define his remaining incarceration while protecting him from future challenges through reputation management, rather than continued violence. 3 weeks after the shower incident that had fundamentally altered Riverside Maximum Security Penitentiary's power dynamics, D-Block operated under dramatically transformed social structures that reflected the complete collapse of Big Mike Torres's 7-year criminal empire through systematic demonstration of military superiority over institutional intimidation. Marcus Chen established modified daily routines designed to maintain personal security while avoiding unnecessary provocations that might trigger challenges from surviving gang elements seeking to rebuild their organizational influence. Through confrontation with the man whose combat capabilities had become legendary throughout the facility, his tactical positioning during meals and yard time demonstrated continued hypervigilance without aggressive displays that might provoke administrative intervention or encourage desperate attacks from inmates whose psychological state had been destabilized by witnessing violence that exceeded their comprehension of human combat capability. The prison's administrative response included enhanced security protocols and closer monitoring of potential gang activities designed to prevent coordinated assaults while maintaining operational efficiency. Warden Patricia Hayes implemented systematic changes based on lessons learned from Torres's failed assassination attempt. Dr. Sarah Williams conducted comprehensive follow-up psychological evaluations with Chen to assess his mental state following violent confrontation that had required systematic elimination of multiple opponents under life-threatening circumstances in confined environment. How are you processing the shower incident emotionally and psychologically? Williams asked during their weekly session, her clinical assessment seeking indicators of post-traumatic stress or aggressive escalation that might require intervention. Engaging in defensive violence, even under extreme provocation, can create lasting psychological consequences. Chen's response demonstrated emotional compartmentalization that had enabled his survival during military special operations in hostile territories where hesitation or moral qualms could result in mission failure and personnel casualties. Violence was necessary for immediate survival against coordinated lethal assault. Chen replied with clinical precision that reflected military training and psychological conditioning. I processed the incident as successful defensive action that preserved my life while minimizing unnecessary casualties among misguided opponents. Sergeant Mike Foster implemented new supervision protocols for shower facilities based on tactical lessons learned from Torres's systematic preparation for coordinated assault. His recommendations emphasized preventing organized attacks while maintaining appropriate privacy standards for institutional operations. Chen's cellmate, Tommy Razor Rodriguez, adapted to dramatically changed power structures within D-Block as his previous loyalty to Torres became irrelevant following the gang leader's hospitalization with extensive injuries that ended his capacity for criminal leadership. "You saved my life during that shower thing," Rodriguez confided to Chen during evening lockdown, his voice carrying genuine gratitude rather than typical criminal manipulation. Torres was planning to eliminate anyone who might have warned you about the assault. His paranoia included killing potential witnesses to maintain operational security. The revelation confirmed Chen's tactical assessment that Torres's operation had been designed to eliminate all evidence while establishing continued dominance through spectacular violence that would discourage future challenges to his authority within D-Block's criminal hierarchy. Other inmates approached Chen with cautious respect, seeking to understand new social dynamics without triggering defensive responses from someone who had demonstrated devastating combat capabilities against overwhelming numerical superiority in confined environment. Chen maintained strict boundaries around personal interactions while providing basic human courtesy that reflected military training in building functional relationships without creating security vulnerabilities through emotional attachments that could be exploited by hostile forces. Prison mail delivery brought Chen his first outside correspondence since arriving at Riverside, a letter from his former commanding officer that acknowledged the shower incident through military intelligence networks, while providing coded guidance about his institutional status. Your operational security remains intact according to administrative review. The carefully worded message confirmed classified oversight of his situation. Continue current posture while maintaining readiness for potential mission developments that may require your specific capabilities. The communication revealed that Chen's imprisonment served purposes beyond criminal punishment, that his classified military service continued influencing his institutional treatment through invisible channels that operated independently of civilian corrections administration. Torres's surviving supporters attempted to reorganize under new leadership, but their efforts collapsed as other inmates refused to challenge Chen's demonstrated supremacy through association with failed criminal enterprise that had been systematically dismantled through individual combat effectiveness. Chen observed attempted reorganization with professional interest while maintaining non-interference policy that allowed natural selection to determine D Block's future leadership without his direct involvement in ongoing 40. Power struggles between surviving criminal elements. New inmates arriving at Riverside received comprehensive briefings about Chen's capabilities from both veteran prisoners and corrections personnel, who recognized the deterrent effect of his reputation on random violence throughout the facility's general population. "Don't mess with the ghost unless you want to discover why they call him that," became standard orientation advice for prison newcomers. "He'll eliminate you before you understand what happened, and nobody will question his right to defend himself." The warnings served Chen's strategic interests by reducing casual challenges while maintaining operational security through mythologized reputation rather than detailed capability assessments that might provide tactical intelligence to potential opponents. Dr. Williams's psychological reports documented Chen's successful adaptation to altered social dynamics without exhibiting signs of aggressive escalation or antisocial behavior patterns that might indicate psychological instability. Following extreme violence, subject demonstrates remarkable emotional regulation despite extraordinary provocation and life-threatening circumstances, Williams noted in her official evaluation. No clinical indicators suggest potential for future violence beyond legitimate defensive necessity when confronted with coordinated assault. Chen's commissary account received unexpected financial additions through anonymous sources that suggested ongoing support from military intelligence networks, maintaining operational oversight of his institutional situation through classified channels. The monetary support enabled Chen to establish modest influence through legitimate economic channels while avoiding protection rackets and illegal activities that typically defined prison financial systems and created dependencies on criminal organizations. Warden Hayes reviewed security footage from the shower incident repeatedly, struggling to comprehend how one individual had systematically defeated 20 attackers without sustaining significant injury through combat techniques that exceeded normal human capabilities. It resembles choreographed demonstration rather than spontaneous violence, Hayes told Foster during weekly administrative briefings. No civilian possesses combat skills sufficient for that level of tactical dominance against overwhelming numerical superiority. Foster's military experience provided context that civilian administrators lacked regarding special forces training and psychological conditioning for extreme violence under adverse conditions. Ma'am. Elite military operators train specifically for these scenarios through systematic preparation that creates capabilities exceeding normal human limitations. The explanation helped Hayes understand that Chen's performance represented professional military conditioning rather than psychopathic violence, enabling appropriate administrative responses to his unique institutional status while maintaining security protocols. Chen's evening meditation practices included psychological techniques designed to maintain emotional equilibrium while processing continuous stress of hypervigilant existence in hostile environment where reputation provided protection. through deterrent effect rather than administrative safeguards. 18 months remained before his parole eligibility, but Chen understood that his classified military service might influence release decisions through channels that operated beyond normal corrections procedures and civilian administrative oversight. The shower incident had transformed from immediate survival crisis into strategic demonstration that established long-term security through reputation management rather than continued violence, creating sustainable protection that would endure throughout his remaining incarceration. 6 months later, D-Block operated under inmate-led councils that resolved disputes through negotiation rather than systematic violence, as Chen's demonstration had proven that overwhelming force could be systematically defeated through individual excellence and professional training. Torres remained in medical facility with permanent disabilities that prevented his return to general population. His criminal empire dissolved through spectacular failure that served as cautionary tale about challenging opponents whose capabilities exceeded institutional experience. Chen had achieved institutional equilibrium through controlled violence that eliminated immediate threats, while establishing deterrent reputation that discouraged future challenges, creating peaceful environment through demonstration of superior combat capability rather than ongoing aggression. The transformation of D-Block's social structure represented unintended consequence of Chen's defensive action, as his systematic elimination of Torres's organization had created power vacuum that enabled more constructive conflict resolution among remaining inmates. Medical personnel continued treating injuries from the shower incident months later, the extensive wounds serving as permanent reminders of consequences for coordinating assault against military-trained opponents whose capabilities transcended normal human limitations through professional conditioning. Chen's reputation extended throughout Riverside's entire population, as inmates recognized that traditional intimidation tactics proved meaningless against opponents whose training exceeded their collective experience with institutional violence and criminal organization. The systematic demonstration had established Chen as a protected individual whose combat capabilities made retaliation inadvisable, while creating deterrent effect that reduced random violence throughout the facility's general population. 18 months after the morning that Big Mike Torres's dismissive laughter had echoed through D-Block's corridors, Marcus the Ghost Chen walked through Riverside Maximum Security Penitentiary's gates as a free man. His early release came through administrative channels that remained opaque to civilian authorities. His military service record still classified beyond standard corrections clearance levels. Behind him, D-Block operated under inmate-led councils that resolved disputes through negotiation rather than systematic violence. Chen's demonstration that overwhelming force could be systematically defeated had forever altered the prison's power dynamics, creating sustainable peace through proven deterrent rather than ongoing intimidation. Dr. Sarah Williams's final psychological evaluation described Chen as an individual whose institutional experience had provided unexpected growth opportunities despite extraordinary circumstances. Her clinical language concealed the transformation she had witnessed in someone who had discovered inner peace through controlled application of defensive violence. Sergeant Mike Foster observed Chen's departure with professional respect, earned through months of witnessing exceptional character under impossible pressure. "Take care of yourself out there, Ghost. The world needs people like you protecting the right things from the wrong people." Chen's response carried weight of classified service and institutional experience that had tested every aspect of his training and moral conditioning. "The world contains more predators than most civilians realize, Sergeant. Someone has to watch the shadows where they operate." A black sedan waited outside the prison gates, its government plates suggesting Chen's release connected to operational requirements that extended beyond normal parole procedures. His service to classified missions continued through channels that never appeared in official records or public documentation. As Riverside disappeared in the rearview mirror, Chen opened a sealed envelope containing his next assignment from military intelligence networks that had monitored his institutional performance. Some warriors never truly retired from service. They simply moved between different operational theaters where their unique capabilities served national security interests. Chen had proven that sometimes the most dangerous predator concealed himself behind the facade of helpless prey, waiting for the perfect moment to demonstrate why true strength emerged from discipline, training, and quiet confidence of someone who had already survived humanity's worst impulses. His story reminded everyone that in any environment, from shower rooms to boardrooms, authentic power belonged to those who possessed both capability and restraint to use it appropriately. The ghost had vanished back into shadows, where America's most dangerous missions required warriors whose existence remained classified, whose sacrifices stayed invisible, and whose victories protected freedoms that civilians never realized had been threatened by forces that operated beyond conventional law enforcement capabilities.